Gottschalks was a retail department store chain that opened in 1904 and closed in 2009. Welcome to another episode of Throwback Thursday. So stay tuned on a random Thursday for a new remade video of an old video that I did before. Thanks.
It happens only once a year. Extra savings during Big G Days at Gottschalks.
Save 30% on two-piece soft dressing from Corette for Mrs. Empatisse. For the casual man, shaver-like shirts and pants, 25 to 30% off. Assorted comforter set, any size, $49.99. And in Emil's Market, this bonus 13-piece cutlery set with purchase of the select 10-piece cookware set by Cook's Bazaar at just $89.99.
Once a year savings now during Gottschalks Big G Days.
The department store was founded by a German-Jewish immigrant named Emil Gottschalks, who had opened a dry goods store in downtown Fresno, California. Gottschalk opened his 10,000 square foot dry goods store to a large customer base who did not have access to products around commonly seen in the area. This resulted in large crowds who would show up to purchase goods at his store. By 1914, the business was so successful, Gottschalks would expand into a 100,000 square foot building at Kern and J Streets. But Gottschalks wouldn't open their second store until 1961 in Merced. Following that expansion, they would soon open branches in Visalia and another one in Fresno. It was around this time that Emil's grandnephew, Irving Levy, whose father had helped found the company, took the helm. In an effort to win over teenage baby boomers, Gottschalks launched Bobby West, a chain of junior apparel stores in the late 1960s. Following on the heels of the new stores, they would launch Village East Shops, which offered large-sized women's clothing in 1970. And during the 1970s, the independent department store chain would expand slowly, opening up stores in Modesto, Santa Maria, and Fresno. In 1976, Gottschalks became America's first department store to totally automate sales transactions. The company installed electronic point-of-sale wands that read barcodes and stored credit cards. This technology helped increase efficiency, it reduced errors, and keep inventory and customer billing up to date. Irving Levy served as president until his death in 1980 at the age of 86, guiding Gottschalks' growth into a chain of 6 department stores and over a dozen specialty boutiques with over $80 million in annual sales. Leadership would transfer to Gerald Blum, whose father was a longtime partner of Irving Levy, who assumed the presidency for about 2 years. Blum advanced to vice chairman and consultant in 1982, making way for Levy's son, Joseph, to take over. Gottschalks formulated a successful strategy for profitable growth in the highly competitive retail industry. The core of the plan was Gottschalks' concentration on smaller markets in California's Central Valley, markets dubbed the Other California by company executives. Their strategy was to stay out of the large metropolitan markets like San Francisco and Los Angeles due to the larger presence of the major national department store chains. It opted instead for overlooked towns with populations of 20 to 60,000 people, areas too small to support larger traditional-sized department stores, and targeted middle-income households. This tactic kept Gottschalks' overhead low by allowing it to build smaller, 80 to 110,000 square foot single-level stores with lower real estate costs and cheaper labor. More often than not, it also made Gottschalks the only game in town with virtually no competition from other department stores. As one of the state's only major retailers willing to locate in smaller cities and towns, the chain was sought out by developers and often able to demand ideal anchor locations in the new medium-sized malls and shopping centers that sprang up throughout the 1970s and 1980s. Unlike many of its small-town competitors in the retail segment, Gottschalks was often the area's only source of nationally branded soft goods. Although the chain was relatively small, it was not technologically backwards. In fact, Gottschalks executives often found themselves at the front of the pack in the race to install the most modern equipment. Gottschalks was Fresno's premier retailer to install an air conditioner and was among the first retailers in the area to accept bank credit cards. By concentrating on California's inland markets, Gottschalks avoided the dramatic ups and downs endemic to the West Coast cities. Gottschalks went public in 1986, selling about 50% of its equity on the New York Stock Exchange. The proceeds were used to step up the pace of the new store acquisition and construction, helping to make Gottschalks California the fastest growing department store chain in the late 1980s. The number of Gottschalks units doubled from 9 in 1985 to 18 in 1988, and annual revenues increased from $112 million to $196 million in the process. Part of this growth came via the acquisition of two small family-run store chains in 1987 and 1988. Totaling $11 million, the purchases of the privately held Malcolm Brock and Samuel Leask & Sons chains added 5 stores. The chain also refined its specialty store offerings, converting its Bobby West Jr. stores into Petite West boutiques mid-decade in order to attract smaller-sized Asian and Latin women. In 1988, Gottschalks decided to close its only money-losing location, ironically the flagship store in downtown Fresno. Annual sales surpassed $200 million in 1989. Buoyed by almost a decade of successful expansion, in 1990, Joe Levy predicted that Gottschalks would add at least 20 new markets and reach $1 billion in annual sales by 1997. In the early 1990s, brand name products generated about 80% of the total sales, with the remainder being private label or non-branded goods. Prominent brand names included Liz Claiborne, Calvin Klein, Levi Strauss, and Sony. High-end cosmetics from Estee Lauder, Clinique, and Lancôme were particularly profitable, ranking as the company's largest-selling product group. Gottschalks' strong customer service was compared to that of Seattle's Nordstrom. By 1991, Gottschalks' computer information system was capable of hourly monitoring of sales and inventory, giving Gottschalks one of the industry's highest turnover rates. While sticking to its essential strategy, Gottschalks made its first foray outside its home state in 1992 when it opened up stores in Washington and Oregon. The company entered the Nevada market in 1995. Although Gottschalks' sales increased from $287 million in 1990 to over $400 million in 1995, it had a cumulative net loss over those 6 fiscal years of $4.9 million. The company saw improvements in year-over-year store performance, focusing especially on 2 underperforming stores. Gottschalks also hoped to lessen its overhead through layoffs at administrative levels, outsourcing, contract renegotiations, and paring of some optional expenses. The company planned to increase income by upping finance and service charges on its store credit card and to enhance cash flow by curtailing capital outlays. In fact, Gottschalks suspended previously laid plans to open 3 new department stores in 1996, choosing instead to apply those funds to operations. In 1995, the company went online. In 1996, they opened a 125,000 square foot store in the troubled Park Lane Center in Reno, Nevada, which had lost its 2 department store anchors, Sears and Weinstock, to a larger competitor mall. In 1998, Gottschalks purchased the 9-store Harris' chain in Southern California. Annual sales exceeded $500 million. The next year, they would close the Harris' flagship store in San Bernardino. By the time of their 1998 merger, in which the 7 local Harris' stores were rebranded as Harris' Gottschalks, both chains were beginning to struggle against the national department stores and discount chains. In the year 2000, The 34-store Lamont's chain in Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, Washington, and Utah was purchased. New stores would open in Redding in Oregon. Most of the Lamont's locations that were acquired by Gottschalks eventually closed due to poor sales. The exception was the Alaska market, where sales were strong and only one store, Wasilla, was closed prior to the company's shutdown. Closures included the locations at the Northgate Mall in Seattle, Washington in September of 2006 and in the Tacoma Highlands on September 22, 2007. In Washington state, the remaining Gottschalks location had succeeded in rural and suburban areas with less competition from other department stores. On October 24, 2008, Gottschalks was delisted from the New York Stock Exchange. By that point, officials were trying to negotiate a deal for a loan with a Chinese company, Everbright Development Overseas Limited. On December 18, 2008, Gottschalks officials announced that Everbright had pulled out of the deal. Like so many companies during the Great Recession, the company didn't have too many viable options left. On January 14, 2009, Gottschalks filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. In March of 2009, Gottschalks announced that it was lined up a group of bidders that would liquidate the chain if no other bidder was found by March 30th. The time came and no viable bidders appeared. On March 31st, Gottschalks announced that it would liquidate its remaining stores. The chain's final stores closed on July 12, 2009. Several prime locations would later become Macy's or Forever 21. Two Riverside County locations, one in Indio and the other located in Moreno Valley, California, as well as locations in Bakersfield, continue to use the Harris-Gottschalks name. No other locations use the Harris-Gottschalks name. Harris's flagship store in San Bernardino closed 4 months later on January 31st, 1999. You may think that that was the end of the story for Harris-Gottschalks. So what happened to some of its former locations? Today, the former Harris's buildings, seen here in downtown Redlands, another location would probably be considered a Gottschalks, which was located at the Redlands Mall in Redlands, California. Another location that was a Harris's and would change their name to Harris-Gottschalks was the one in Moreno Valley. I was able to visit the mall where they still had the name on the outer doors to the closed up former department store. The former location has not been occupied since 2009. I recently visited the former 60,000 square foot Harris's in the city of Indio. The location was at the Indio Fashion Mall, which opened on February 24th, 1975. It became a Gottschalks in 1999 and closed sometime later. It is currently occupied by a Harbor Freight in what is now called the Indio Grand Marketplace. Last but certainly not least was the third location of the Harris's department store. This location was built in 1957 at the Riverside Plaza and was over 200,000 square feet. The former Riverside Harris's was renovated in 2014 after the closure of Forever 21 in early 2013. It is now occupied by a Nordstrom Rack, Marshalls, and a Joann Fabrics. So what do you remember about this place? Leave a comment or a suggestion for a future video below. And if you haven't already, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.
Bringing back memories from the good old days. That's super cool, man.